Hello fellow mech warriors, Mage Leader here. Welcome back to another episode of the Battlemech Primer, the series where I serenade your earholes with the sweet, sweet music of Battlemech information. Today's story is one of innovation, experimentation, and painful, agonizing failure. On this episode, we're going to be asking the big questions. No, not that one. The question we're looking for is, what separates a good idea from a bad one? And when does an innovative concept become a waste of time and resources? That's right, today we're talking about land air mechs, or LAMs. More specifically, the Phoenix Hawk. So what is an LAM? Basically, it's a single machine designed to fill the roles of several. A mech that can transform into an aerotech, as well as a mode set in between the two extremes. The idea behind them was to render dedicated mechs and aerotech obsolete, allowing the SLDF to save money by only building one type of machine as opposed to several. This was a totally new idea and had never been tried before in the history of mankind, and even if it did, I'm sure it would have met with nothing but success and... Oh dear. The Phoenix Hawk didn't begin life as an LAM. Instead, it was a mediocre battlemech produced by Orgus Industries in 2568. Orgus had already made a splash with their Stinger concept a few years prior, and the Phoenix Hawk was meant to be a bigger, badder version of the design. What resulted was a medium mech. Sounds good on paper, but there's a problem. See, the Stinger is one of the smallest light mechs you can get, weighing in at a measly 20 tons. Any smaller and it'd be a suit of elemental battle armor. The Phoenix Hawk was the same design, but upscaled to 45 tons. Basically, they put the design into Photoshop and just moved the scale bar a couple notches. So the Phoenix Hawk wasn't so much a medium mech as a tall, light mech. What I mean by that is while it technically had more firepower and armor than its predecessor, ton for ton, it was less armed and protected than other medium mechs. It gained a reputation for being something of a fragile flower, lacking the armor for any real engagement. While it had an impressive top speed of 97.75 kph on its side, its larger profile made it an easier target at mid to close range. It was going to get hit whether the pilot liked it or not, and when it did, it would crumple like a leaf. While this meant that the Phoenix Hawk wasn't the go-to for mech-on-mech action, it did find some popularity as a recon machine. It came equipped with jump jets, and its speed made it ideally suited for gathering intel. On top of that, it had more than enough firepower to give most small ground and air targets a panic attack. If kept at a distance from the action, it was ideal for patrols and scouting missions. However, the design would struggle to really distinguish itself as there were plenty of light mechs that could do the same job better and cheaper. Nevertheless, it was popular enough to keep Orgus afloat, and it turned a healthy profit. In the late 27th century, Orgus would license a few of their designs to Allied Aerospace, who had recently won a bid from the SLDF to produce a new kind of battlemech, one that would revolutionize warfare and grant the Terran hegemony a technological edge should it ever be forced to defend itself. Initially, Allied Aerospace had tried something so incredibly stupid that it just might work. They took a look at a Shadowhawk and said, "Yeah, this is great and all, but what if it could fucking fly?" The Shadowhawk LAM was a piece of garbage, prone to malfunctions and far too expensive to be practical. Nevertheless, Admiral David Peterson thought the idea of a transforming battlemech was, and I quote, "fucking sick." So Allied was given the green light to try the same idea with other battlemechs. Their first real attempt was with the Stinger. This design was far more successful, though it still suffered from several key problems. The first was the cost of production. An LAM costs exponentially more to manufacture than a standard battlemech. They have complicated and sophisticated thingamajigs and whatchamahoozies, and even the occasional dingle-fop. All these gizmos are expensive, and they need expert technicians to maintain, not to mention expert pilots to properly use. So, should you buy a single LAM, or use that money to manufacture a dozen urban mechs? The second issue is that they don't do anything particularly well. They can fly, even in space, but if they start a dogfight, they'll be outclassed by the purpose-built Voidcraft and Aerotech. They can be a battlemech, but if they start a brawl, they'll get stomped by the competition. Or they can be something in between and get destroyed by both things at once. A transforming mech sounds good on paper, but in practice the jack of all trades is a master of none. The third problem is that half the time they didn't even fucking work. Transitioning between the different modes was risky, particularly in the middle of combat. There are a lot of moving parts in an LAM, and that means that there are dozens of things that can go wrong, and Murphy's Law most definitely applies on the battlefield. In fact, I'm pretty sure more LAMs were lost due to mechanical failures than ever from enemy fire. Of course, these inherent flaws didn't stop Allied Aerospace from trying again, and this time they chose to give the Phoenix Hawk a try. It was the largest LAM ever attempted, and the first one rolled off the assembly line in 2701. Allied had taken a mech with only one real use and tried to make it do everything at once. The results were less than ideal. The Phoenix Hawk LAM was even less reliable than the Stinger. It was heavier, slower, more expensive, more prone to having its delicate parts jam and send the pilot to an early grave, and overall, it was just a massive pile of dog shit. In the end, the LAM idea would be abandoned in favor of less harebrained schemes. It would remain a failed idea for centuries, only being revived by the word of Blake. But seeing as the Wabi's default tactic is to charge Battlemechs with infantry, I wouldn't look to them for military innovation. LAMs were an experiment that ultimately ended in abject failure. Today, LAMs are considered to be museum pieces and collector's items more than tools of war. They are exceedingly rare, as the technology to build one that even comes close to working properly was lost in the Succession Wars. Hell, even the Star League couldn't figure out how to make them function.
But your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Today, the Phoenix Hawk is a reminder of the folly of chasing an idea just because it sounds cool. Yeah, it's neat to make a bigger version of your popular light mech, but that doesn't mean it'll be useful. Sure, having a giant robot that can turn into a plane is neat in comic books or cute in cartoons, but that doesn't mean it'll be worth the trouble to actually build one. So what separates a good idea from a bad one? Well, the answer is simple. Does the idea involve a Phoenix Hawk? If the answer is yes, then it's a bad idea. Should you ever come across an intact LAM, don't bother trying to use it. Maintenance is almost impossible due to the rarity of the parts required, and good luck finding anyone with the skills required to pilot one well. You gotta be both a good mech jockey and an ace aerotech pilot just to handle the basic operations of an LAM. Sell it to a wealthy collector and use the profits to buy yourself a shiny new dropship. Trust me, it'll be 1,000 times more useful to you. Modern Phoenix Hawks are almost exclusively the non-LAM version, and the design hasn't changed much in the past 500 years. The standard variant is the PXH-1, which is equipped with a large laser, 2 mediums, and a pair of machine guns. This doesn't sound all that impressive, and it really isn't, but the Phoenix Hawk featured a TrueTrack targeting computer, which granted it superior accuracy at long range. It had a nasty habit of standing outside the enemy's effective range and hitting targets from afar while running at full tilt. This meant that it was difficult to hit one, provided the pilot wasn't stupid enough to engage in actual combat and trade damage. In a one-on-one fight, the Phoenix Hawk will disintegrate, but when used properly, it can be a decent weapon. It's been around for centuries, and they were produced in huge quantities, almost as much as the Griffin. While it was never as ubiquitous, it was nevertheless a staple of inner-sphere recon lances through decades of total war. If you wind up with one of these things in your company, do yourself a favor. Give it the default loadout and use it as the designers intended, as it's not a mech to be tampered with. Its hardpoints don't allow for much variety, and it lacks the protection to function effectively in any other capacity. Use it for recon, and nothing else. You could strap a PPC on it and use it as a sniper as well, but for the love of God, keep it out of the front line. So that's the Phoenix Hawk, a mech filled to the brim with half-baked ideas. It's managed to dig out a niche for itself despite its numerous flaws, however, and it's not completely useless. It's just mostly useless. Still, if you're desperate for a scout and there aren't any light mechs available, it'll at least do the job better than an Atlas. Take notes, Lyrans. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to leave a comment down below. I read each one, and they're the reason I keep making these videos. Seriously, the dopamine I get from reading feedback is better than crack. Until next time, this is Mage Leader, signing off.